In the winter of 2011, an 89-year-old man named Ronald Read walked into a small hospital in Brattleboro, Vermont. He was wearing a faded denim jacket, held together at the seam by a single safety pin. He walked with a slow, deliberate shuffle, his hands shoved deep into his pockets against the chill. While he was waiting in the lobby for a routine checkup, his jacket slipped off his shoulder. A woman standing nearby saw him, felt a sudden pang of pity, reached into her purse and quietly placed a coin on his lap. She assumed he was homeless. Ronald didn't correct her. He didn't get angry. He just picked up the coin, smiled softly, nodded his thanks, and slipped it into his pocket. What that woman didn't know, and what almost nobody in that small town knew for over half a century, was that Ronald Read was sitting on more than $8 million. He had spent 37 years working as a gas station attendant and a night janitor, sweeping floors, changing oil, and hauling trash. He drove a second-hand Buick that he bought cash. He chopped his own firewood well into his 80s. He used safety pins instead of buying new clothes. And yet, while the world looked at him and saw a man barely surviving on the margins of society, his money was silently multiplying in the background, compounding in accounts that nobody in his life even knew existed. When he passed away a few years later, his family went through his belongings and found a thick stack of stock certificates tucked inside an old metal box in his house. The local newspaper ran the story, and the town was stunned. People who had bought coffee from him every morning for decades couldn't process it. But the real story wasn't just that a janitor managed to get rich. The real story was what happened to his mind during those 50 years. What actually happens to a human being when they possess immense, life-changing power, but actively choose to hide it from every single person around them? Most people think about money in terms of display. From the time we're old enough to pay attention, we're conditioned to believe that wealth is inherently visible. We think of the house on the hill with the long driveway, the quiet hum of a luxury engine at a red light, the tailored clothes, the expensive trips, the subtle status markers that signal to the rest of the tribe, I have made it. I am safe. I am important. But when you flip that script, when you deliberately build massive financial leverage while maintaining the outward appearance of a completely ordinary life, you trigger a psychological transformation that changes how you view everything. Humanity, relationships, work, survival, and time itself all look completely different from behind the curtain of secret wealth. The shift doesn't happen all at once. It moves through distinct, undeniable phases. The first phase is the shift in how you process human noise. When you start accumulating money quietly, the desperate urgency to prove yourself simply evaporates. In the beginning, when someone is broke or living paycheck to paycheck, almost every social interaction carries an underlying layer of tension. Conversations about careers, neighborhood choices, cars, or vacations feel loaded. There is an implicit pressure to match energy, to look like you belong, to project an image that protects your pride. When you don't have financial security, status becomes your armor. You use it to tell the world that you're doing fine, even when you aren't. But as the numbers in your hidden accounts cross certain invisible thresholds, a strange, heavy calm settles into your chest. You can sit at a dinner table or stand in an office break room listening to people brag about their recent purchases, their new lease agreements, or their high-interest financing deals, and you realize something fundamental that most people go their entire lives without seeing. Almost all visible wealth in modern society is just debt dressed up as success. People are trading their future freedom for present applause. When you hold real leverage behind a quiet life, you stop listening to what people say and start watching how trapped they are. You see the stress behind the bright smile when someone talks about their new mortgage. You notice the subtle panic in a coworker's eyes when a minor company restructure is mentioned. You realize that while they look like they're winning, they are actually walking a tightrope over a canyon with no safety net. And you, in your worn-out shoes and average clothes, are standing on solid bedrock. That realization introduces the second phase, the total purity and total isolation of your relationships. Consider what happens when the world finds out someone has money. The dynamics of every single human connection immediately skew out of alignment. Friends start looking at you as a potential loan officer or a safety net. Relatives develop sudden, life-altering emergencies that only a check can solve. Acquaintances you haven't spoken to in 6 years reach out with groundbreaking business opportunities that just need a little starting capital. The air around a wealthy person becomes thick with expectation, resentment, and subtle manipulation. When you build wealth in secret, you preserve the absolute purity of your social circle. The people who invite you over for dinner are doing it because they actually enjoy your company. The person who falls in love with you is falling in love with your character, your mind, and your presence, because as far as they know, you have zero material leverage to offer them. You get to experience human connection in its unadulterated form. You become an invisible observer of human nature. You get to see how people treat the service worker, the quiet guy in the corner, the person they assume can do nothing for them. You learn who is genuine and who is performing. You collect truth every single day because nobody is trying to sell you anything or impress you. Hash map of human behavior becomes remarkably clear. But keeping a secret of that scale isn't easy. It creates a peculiar, quiet internal friction that you have to manage every single day. In the early years of stealth wealth, there is a constant grating conflict between who you are on paper and who you are forced to be in public. You might be making 3, 4, or 5 times your boss's annual salary through quiet investments, compounding equity, or private ventures. Yet you still have to put on the same uniform, sit in the same cramped cubicle, drink the same bad coffee, and listen to complaints about the rising cost of eggs. You begin living 2 completely separate, parallel lives. In one life, you are analyzing compound curves, tracking asset allocation, and watching your net worth eclipse the lifetime earnings of everyone in your immediate family. In the other life, you are worrying about a squeaky brake belt on a 12-year-old Honda so your neighbors don't suspect you have extra cash sitting around. This split existence completely rewires how you deal with everyday stress. When a normal person encounters a sudden financial shock, a broken water heater, a blown transmission, an unexpected medical bill, it triggers an immediate fight or flight response. Adrenaline spikes, sleep suffers, arguments happen at the kitchen table. But when you have hidden reserves, those exact same events lose their power entirely. A $1,500 emergency stops being a crisis and degrades into a minor administrative inconvenience. You don't panic. You just write the check or swipe the card, pay it off that night from a hidden account, and move on with your afternoon. While the people around you spend days or weeks visibly shaken by an unexpected expense, you remain completely unmoved. That detachment starts to show up in your posture. You don't become arrogant. In fact, true stealth wealth almost always makes a person humbler because they realize how fragile the illusion of status really is. But you do become immovable. When your manager tries to use subtle fear tactics to get you to work unpaid overtime, it fails. You don't flinch. You don't scramble to make excuses. You just look at them with a calm, steady gaze and politely say, no. When a company threatens layoffs, while everyone else is frantically updating their resumes in a cold sweat, you sit at your desk eating lunch, completely at peace. You know that if you decided to walk out the door right now, you wouldn't actually need to find another job for 10, 15, or 20 years. Or maybe ever. People notice that posture. They can't explain it because on paper you look just like them. Same salary, same car, same modest apartment, but they can sense that you possess some unseen gravity. They realize you can't be pushed around, intimidated, or bought off easily. The irony is that by hiding your money, you gain the exact respect and peace of mind that people who flaunt their money are desperately trying to buy. There's an old concept in naval strategy called the fleet in being. The core idea is simple. A nation can exert massive strategic power across an entire ocean simply by keeping a fleet of heavily armed ships sitting quietly in a home port, without ever firing a single cannon. The mere existence of the force, completely untouched, forces every potential enemy to change their behavior. Hidden wealth operates on the exact same mechanics. It is an unspent force that protects your life simply by existing. The moment you spend it on visible status symbols, the moment you turn that capital into expensive cars, watches, and designer wear, you convert potential force into kinetic noise. You trade permanent protection for temporary attention. As the years roll on and the compound interest does its silent work, the psychological shift cuts even deeper. You start developing a profound allergy to the hidden taxes of visible luxury. Most people only look at the price tag of an asset. They see a $60,000 luxury SUV and think the cost is $60,000. But someone who understands secret wealth sees the invisible invoice attached to it. They see the higher insurance premiums, the specialized maintenance costs, the rapid depreciation, and the constant nagging anxiety of parking it in a crowded grocery store lot. They look at a massive 7-bedroom home and don't just see square footage. They see higher property taxes, massive utility bills, endless roof repairs, landscaping crews, and the mental bandwidth required to maintain a tiny kingdom. Visible luxury demands constant maintenance, constant upgrade cycles, and constant defense against fading relevance. It traps you on a treadmill where the speed keeps increasing, but you aren't actually moving anywhere. When you choose to look completely average while sitting on extraordinary resources, you bypass that entire system of anxiety. You step off the treadmill entirely. You begin to redefine what luxury actually means. To the outside world, luxury is consumption. It's expensive food, rare wine, high-end brands, and first-class seats. But to the person quietly building unstoppable wealth in the background, those things look remarkably cheap. To you, real luxury becomes absolute, unyielding control over your time. It is the luxury of waking up on a rainy Tuesday morning and deciding you aren't going to set an alarm because you don't owe anyone your morning hours. It's the luxury of spending 4 hours reading a book in a park because the weather is nice, without feeling a shred of guilt about what you should be doing. It's the ability to step in and fully pay for a relative's cancer treatment or buy a friend out of a predatory loan, quietly, through an anonymous transfer, without needing a single thank you or public acknowledgement. It's knowing that whatever economic hurricane hits the world tomorrow, inflation spikes, stock market crashes, housing bubbles, corporate collapses, your foundation is anchored so deep into the earth that the storm can't even shake the front door. There comes a critical point in this journey where the desire to tell anyone almost completely dies out. When someone first starts making real money, the human ego craves external validation. It's a natural biological drive. We want our peers to know we succeeded. We want the people who doubted us to see us winning. In the early stages of building wealth, you feel this constant, itchy temptation to drop subtle hints. You want to casually mention an investment return, drop a hint about your liquid savings, or wear something just expensive enough that someone in the room notices. Most people give in to that itch. They leak their wealth into the world to buy short-term admiration, and in doing so, they dismantle their own safety net. But if you can survive that initial phase, if you can sit with the secret long enough for the ego's thirst to dry up, something incredible happens. The need for external applause completely dies. You realize that validation from strangers or acquaintances is the weakest currency on earth. It burns up in seconds, leaves behind a bitter ash, and leaves you hungrier for attention than you were before. But internal certainty, the deep, uninterrupted knowledge that you own your life, your time, your decisions, and your future, that feeds your soul forever. You no longer care if people think you're average. In fact, you prefer it. You actively want people to underestimate you. When people underestimate you, they leave you alone. They don't expect anything from you. They don't try to compete with you. They don't project their envy onto you. You get to move through the world with total friction-free freedom, wearing plain clothes, driving an unassuming car, moving like a ghost through a hyper-competitive society that is burning itself out in pursuit of status. When Ronald Read passed away in that small town in Vermont, he didn't leave his $8 million to luxury fashion houses, high-end car dealerships, or exotic resorts. He had no use for those things when he was alive, and he certainly didn't care about them when he was gone. He willed $6 million directly to his local public library and the small regional hospital he had walked into years earlier in his safety-pinned denim jacket. The very places he had visited quietly every week as an ordinary citizen were transformed forever by a man they thought was broke. He didn't use his wealth to buy a temporary stage in front of strangers who would forget his name in a week. He used it to build a permanent anchor for the community he called home, long after his name was carved into a quiet headstone. That is the ultimate destination of building wealth in complete secret. You stop viewing money as a loud megaphone to show the world who you are, and you start using it as a quiet shield to decide who you want to be when nobody is watching.